Yeah, yeah.
Okay. Good evening, all. I'm going to talk about aortoiliac disease endovascular treatment today. This one says, I'm not able to move this. Okay. So the aortoiliac occlusive disease was first implication was described by John Hunter in 1700 and later described by René Lerich in 1923. And it accounts for approximately 1/3 of all the symptomatic peripheral arterial disease patient. And it has remained always a common therapeutic challenge for the vascular surgeons. So there has been a paradigm shift for last 2 decades in which the aortoiliac occlusive disease treatment has been shifted from open surgery to endovascular surgery due to the improvement in the imaging and the endovascular technology. So indications for the endovascular management of the aortoiliac occlusive disease can be the patient specific or lesion specific. So patient specific indications can be lifestyle limiting claudication or disabling claudication. These patients are usually young patients and have a disease limited to the aortoiliac segment only. While the patient who present with a chronic limb threatening ischemia, they are usually older patients and have diffuse aortoiliac occlusive disease along with the multi-level occlusive disease. So other indications can be the vasculogenic impotence or atheromatous embolization. So in vasculogenic impotence, the patient has difficulty or in achieving or sustaining the erection due to the decreased blood supply to the internal pudendal artery. While the patient who are having the atheromatous embolization to the lower extremity, they usually present with the blue toe syndrome. So lesion specific indications can be guided by the task classification, task 2 classification, which was given in the 2007. So according to that classification, it can be divided into the 4 types. Type A lesions are unilateral or bilateral stenosis of the common iliac artery, or unilateral or bilateral single short less than 3 centimeter or equal to 3 centimeter stenosis of the external iliac artery. While the type B lesions include the infrarenal aortic stenosis, which is less than 3 centimeter, or unilateral common iliac occlusion, or single or multiple stenosis, that is 3 to 10 centimeter, involving the external iliac artery but not extending to common femoral artery. Or it can be the unilateral external iliac occlusion, which is not involving the origin of internal iliac or common femoral artery. So while the type C lesions, they include the bilateral common iliac occlusion or bilateral external iliac stenosis, which are 3 to 10 centimeter long, but not extending into the CFA. Or it can be the unilateral external iliac stenosis, which can be extending to CFA, or unilateral external iliac artery occlusion, that is involving the origin of internal iliac or CFA. Or it can be heavily calcified unilateral external iliac artery occlusion with or without the involvement of origin of internal iliac or common femoral artery. While type D lesions involved basically include that infrarenal aortoiliac occlusion or diffuse aortoiliac disease, which requires the treatment, or unilateral common iliac, external iliac, and a CFA stenosis, or unilateral occlusion of the common iliac artery and external iliac artery, or bilateral external iliac artery occlusions. And the iliac stenosis in patients with the abdominal aortic aneurysm, which requires treatment, but they are not amenable to endograft placement. So previously the type A and type means it was type A and type B lesions were usually a preferred modality of treatment is endovascular, but nowadays the type C and type D lesions also are treated by the endovascular management due to the improvement of both technology and the imaging. So type D, basically the type D lesions, the open surgery is preferred, but in patients who are high risk, like a patient with a COPD, patient who have coronary artery disease which is not reconstructible, or patient who are having low ejection fraction, can be treated by the endovascular approach. So this is another classification which is given by the Society of Cardiovascular and Interventional Radiology, and according to in 1990, which also divide into the 4 types of the aortoiliac lesions, but only this classification does not include the that involvement of the common femoral artery. So all the patients should be evaluated by history, physical examination, and non-invasive testing. And usually this aortoiliac occlusive disease patient present with the claudication pain, which is in the hip, gluteal, or the thigh region, or in the patient who have multi-level disease can present with the calf claudication, and along with, or can have rest pain or tissue loss. And 20 to 30% of the patient present with the vasculogenic impotence along with. On examination, normally there are ephemeral pulses are not palpable or they are diminished, and in the groin or in the lower abdomen we can hear the bruit also. So in the non-invasive imaging, non-invasive testing, so all the patients should undergo ABPI and the toe pressure testing. And in the patients in which the pulses are palpable or ABPI is normal at rest, they can undergo treadmill test to rule out to differentiate from the vasculogenic from the neurogenic claudication. So all these patients should be evaluated with the additional investigation, radiological investigation, which can be ultrasound, MRI, or CT angiogram. So ultrasound duplex can adequately assess the iliac and the CFA disease, but the limitation is it is operator dependent, and because of the overlying bowel gas or in obese patients, it become a limited utility. So, but it is very useful to assess the common femoral artery disease burden. Then MR angiogram is another modality which can assess aortoiliac occlusive disease, but the limitation is it cannot assess the degree of the calcification. While other contraindications like patients who are having metallic implants or patients who have claustrophobia or having the chronic renal disease, so high chances of nephrogenic systemic fibrosis, nephrogenic fibrosis due to the gadolinium contrast. So MRI is contraindicated in those patients. So CT angiogram is the main modality of the investigation. So with the CT angiogram, we can assess the lesion location, extent, degree of calcification, and severity of disease according to the task classification. Only limitations are the patients we are using the ionizing radiation, and the patients who have contrast allergy or patients who have borderline GFR or the low GFR. So high chances of the contrast induced nephropathy. So there are the no absolute contraindications for the endovascular management of the aortoiliac occlusive disease, but these are the relative contraindication in patients who have juxtarenal aortic occlusion, because stent placement or stent graft placement can lead to the embolization to the renal artery. Or the patient who have circumferential heavy calcification, which is more than 1 mm. So these patients are at high risk of the arterial dissection, arterial fracture or rupture. And patients who have hypoplastic aortic syndrome, which are common in the female patients who are the smokers. And in patients who have iliac occlusive disease, juxtaposition to the aneurysmal disease, which is not amenable to the endograft placement. So before going to the intervention, so all the patients, all the imaging should be reviewed and patient should be assessed, and a baseline investigation should be done, blood investigation and the radiological investigation, and patient preoperatively should be optimized for the comorbidities. And if the patient is having low GFR or the borderline GFR, all the preventive measures should be taken to prevent the contrast nephropathy. So while doing intervention, so approach, normally we do the we do the approach through the common femoral artery. So it can be the retrograde ipsilateral femoral axis, or can be antegrade contralateral femoral axis, or it can be bidirectional. But the patient in which we are not able to achieve, or in case of the subintimal, in case of dissection, or where we are not able to cross subintimal into the true lumen, in those patients we can choose the antegrade upper limb axis also. So we should know the anatomy of the abdominal aorta and its branches before doing any intervention. So infrarenal aorta, they have lumbar branch, and then divide into the common iliac artery, has a median sacral artery, and then internal iliac, common iliac divide into external and internal iliac has own branches. and then external iliac continue as the common femoral and divide into the SFA and the profunda. So this is basically the picture while doing the DSA, digital subtraction angiography. So the frame, what should be the frame? So normally to look for the whole aortoiliac segment, a 30 centimeter frame is required. But if the frame is 20 centimeter, we can look for the better look the morphology of the lesion. So so it should be taken in both 30 centimeter and 20 centimeter to look for the better morphology. And we should obtain the 3 aortographic view. So it can be it should be the left anterior oblique, right anterior oblique, and the AP view. It is basically to look for the pararenal aorta. Then contralateral oblique view are basically to look for the internal iliac origin and patency. And the ipsilateral oblique views are basically to look for the profunda and the femoral common femoral artery. So basically profunda origin and its division into the common femoral division into the profunda and SFA. So after putting the sheath, and it can be the ipsilateral or the ipsilateral retrograde approach, or can be the contralateral antegrade approach. So to determine the hemodynamic significant lesion, we should measure the pressure across the lesion. So that can be measured either we attach the that arterial pressure line to the sheath hub and monitor the pressure proximal and the distal to lesion, or we can attach to the catheter and pull back the catheter slowly from proximal to distal and can measure the systolic pressure across the lesion. So any peak to peak systolic pressure gradient of more than 10 millimeter of mercury at rest is significant. And if we are not able to identify the significant lesion, we can give the intra-arterial vasodilator, either NTG or papaverine can be given, and wait for 20 to 40 seconds so that the maximum vasodilatory effect comes, and then measure the pressure across the lesion, and that can determine the any significant lesion. So technique to basically recanalize the CTO common iliac artery. So already discussed, it can be ipsilateral antegrade, ipsilateral retrograde approach. So in the ipsilateral retrograde approach, after inserting the sheath, we take a catheter and the wire, and which can be the hydrophilic wire also, and we approach the lesion, and it can be crossed intraluminally, and the catheter can be crossed over the wire into the intraluminally across the lesion, and then we have to it should be the blood should be aspirated so that it means that it is intraluminal. So, but most of the time in the ipsilateral retrograde access, the wire doesn't go intraluminal. So it goes into the subintimal plane. So after going into the subintimal plane, the catheter is followed and the wire can be re-entered into the true lumen at the end of the occlusion. But in case it is not feasible, it is not accessible, then we can use the different technique. The first is the start technique, that is the subintimal tracking and the re-entry, which we normally do. But in case the start technique is not feasible, then we can use the cart technique. So cart technique is basically the controlled antegrade and retrograde tracking of the wire. So in this technique, basically we retrograde, we enter the wire subintimally, and after that, after some extent, that track is dilated with the balloon, and from the other side, from the antegrade axis, antegrade ipsilateral contralateral axis, the wire is entered into this subintimal plane through that axis. Or it can be the reverse cart also. In the reverse cart, we dilate, we enter the subintimally from proximal, and then dilate the track, and then wire can be tracked from the retrograde into the intraluminally can be entered. So this technique is followed when the start technique fails. But in case the patient is having chronic total occlusion and has a stump, so we can this is the same, we can take the ipsilateral we can take the antegrade upper limb access also, in case if the star technique and the card technique fails. So if that antegrade upper limb access from the brachial artery can be taken. Then in case all these techniques we are not able to follow, then we have the re-entry wires and the catheters. So re-entry wires basically based on the mechanism of the rotation and the vibration, so helps to enter the true lumen. And there are the re-entry catheters like Outback catheter and the Volcano catheter by the Pioneer, so is available. So they have a lateral exit port. So in the Volcano catheter, they have a IVUS at the end, so that helps in the basically that looking at the true lumen, and direction of the lateral exit port can be placed accordingly on the IVUS guided. So once the catheter is inside the subintimal plane and the it is confirmed, location is confirmed, so nitinol cannula is pushed into the into the intima, and the wire is crossed into the true lumen. So the re-entry wires and catheter can be used in case all other technique fails. So in the lesions, common iliac artery lesions which are extending to aorta, so in these cases we usually take the bidirectional approach. So we track the wire, we cross the lesion with the wire, and the catheter are tracked over the wire, and then these lesions are dilated with the either the kissing balloon technique, or if the stent we have to put the stent, then the bilateral kissing stents are placed. Then the role of concomitant femoral endarterectomy. So whenever the disease burden of the CFA is more than 50%, so we have to do the CFA endarterectomy. So in this case, we have to follow the hybrid approach. So CFA is exposed from the deep circumflex iliac branch of the external iliac artery to the bifurcation. And after exposing, the CFA is punctured, and the wire is entered intraluminally. So, and the blood is aspirated, means basically it is for the intraluminal location of the wire. So after the wire is entered, and then it is crossed across the lesion, then after the proximal and distal control is taken, and the common femoral artery is opened up, and the endarterectomy is done, and the patch is applied. And after applying the patch, it is cannulated with the 18 gauge cannula, and wire can be taken out through that cannula, and we can insert the sheath over that to for further intervention. Then what to stent sizing and selection. So about the sizing, 5 to 10% oversizing is recommended, but it should not be used in the heavily calcified lesion, because it can lead to the either the fracture of the lesion, can lead to dissection, and can cause the rupture also. And for the short eccentric calcified lesion which are present at the ostia, which are normally present at the ostia, so balloon expandable stents are used, because of they have high radio opacity, and the precision of the placement. While in case of the tortuous path, or the patient in the external iliac artery, or we are approaching from the contralateral side over the aortic bifurcation, self-expanding stents are placed, which are more flexible, and they have high radial strength. So technical success is basically defined as the patient is having after doing the stenting or plasty or stenting, there is a less than 20% residual stenosis, and the hemodynamic significance is that it should be across the lesion pressure gradient should be less than 10 millimeter of mercury. So then the various questions arises that whether we should do only the angioplasty, or we should do stenting along with, is the protection of the contralateral common iliac artery is necessary, or whether we should do selective or primary stenting, and what about role of stenting in claudication and chronic limb threatening ischemia, and the role of stent grafting, the role of concomitant femoral endarterectomy, and what are the predictors of the failure. So first question is that percutane, we should do only the angioplasty or stenting along with. So Parson et al. In this study in 1998 published that 1 year patency rate for the common iliac was 87%, but the external iliac lesions were only the 56%. But overall 4 years patency rate are very less for the percutaneous transluminal angioplasty, that is around 44 to 65%. So similarly, in the randomized trial of stent versus angioplasty, that is a STAG trial, that is between the primary stent placement or the PTA, and it was found that there was no significant difference in the primary or secondary patency at 2 years, but the stent placement is leads to the more increased technical success and less procedural complication, that is predominantly it is distal embolization, so compared with the balloon angioplasty. So stent, according to this patency and the less risk of the embolization, the stent is preferred over the angioplasty. So now second question is the protection of the contralateral side is necessary or not. So Smith and colleague, they in their retrospective review of 170 patients, so they reviewed the 170 patients who underwent common iliac stent stenting or plasty within 2 centimeters of origin. So they found without any protection of the contralateral side. So they found that only the luminal compromise was present only in the 2 patients. So they suggested the protection of the contralateral common iliac artery is not mandatory, but there are no prospective study or no randomized trial on that. So we prefer to protect the common contralateral artery to prevent the that luminal compromise or the embolization on the contralateral side. So then the whether it should be the primary stenting or it should be the selective stenting. So then the Dutch iliac stent trial study, they compared the patient who underwent either primary stenting or PTA with the selective stenting, and they found no difference in the re-intervention rate at 5 years, and also concluded that the PTA with the selective stenting is more cost effective. So and also found that along with the patient with the iliac artery disease are at high risk of cardiovascular morbidity and mortality, that is around 13% and 11%. But then Bosch et al. Compared the meta-analysis of the percut PTA and the stent placement for aortoiliac occlusive disease in patients who are claudicant and who are having critical limb ischemia. So they first thing they found that the patient who are claudicant, they have better patency rate than the patient who have chronic limb threatening ischemia. And the second thing they found that with the stent placement, the risk of long-term failure was reduced by 39% as compared with the percutaneous transluminal angioplasty. Then comes the what are the long-term results after the, so based on these studies, we found that the iliac primary stenting have higher patency rate and more useful than the selective stenting or PTA. So then what about the long-term results? The Schurman and et al. Published the 10-year results after the iliac artery stent placement, and they observed the primary patency rate of 66% after 5 years and 46% after 10 years, while the secondary patency rate were 79% after 5 years and 55% after 10 years. While Galleria and et al. They found a higher secondary patency rate which approached 80% after 10 years, and they were able to salvage the limbs in approximately at 97% of the patient at 5 years and 85% of the patient at 10 years. So they basically included the patient who were having task A and B lesions. Then we come to the extensive aortoiliac occlusive disease, so which is involving the aortic bifurcation or infrarenal diffuse aortoiliac disease. So normally in these patients we prefer the that bidirectional approach, and bilateral kissing stents are placed. So what is the difference between the endovascular management of the TAS C and D lesions versus the open reconstruction? So Kashyap et al. They studied that long-term limb-based patency rate at for 3 years between the aortofemoral bypass and the revascularization and percutaneous transluminal angioplasty and stenting. they found the primary patency rate was higher for the aorto bifemoral bypass, while but the secondary patency rate and the limb salvage and long-term survival, they were similar in both the both approach. So they concluded that PTAS is a less invasive alternative to aorto bifemoral bypass for the treatment of severe aortoiliac occlusive disease, but repair of concomitant that femoral endarterectomy is needed in both open or endovascular treatment if there is a significant burden of disease. While the patient who are having the critical limb ischemia or poor outflow or renal failure, they were associated with decreased survival. So Jongkind and all, they systematically reviewed the endovascular management for the extensive aortoiliac occlusive disease, and they published the 5-year patency rate, primary and secondary patency, and they found that the 5-year patency rates, primary patency is between 66 to 86% in between the different studies, and secondary patency rate approach from 80 to 90%. So according to these studies, the TAS C and D lesions can be treated with the endovascular management, with the endovascular technique fairly. So then comes the comparison of whether we should use the bare stents or the covered stents. So that is the COBEST trial, that is the covered versus a bare metal expandable stent trial. So in this trial, the aortoiliac lesion which were treated with the covered stent, they were basically more likely to free from the restenosis than those treated with the bare metal stent. So they first published the 18-month result and found the difference in the TAS C and D lesions, and there was no difference demonstrated for the TAS B lesions. And after that, they published the 5-year results also, and 5-year limb-based stent patency rate are higher for the covered stent than the bare metal stents. So kissing stent technique is mainly used for the aortoiliac occlusive disease, and but there are the few technical aspects of this. So this local geometry of the kissing stent is not feasible, and it leads to the restenosis or leads to the thrombus formation or occlusion. That can be because of the radial mismatch between the two stents, and that leads to the basically the space around the stents, and can lead to the recirculation of the flow and low shear stress, and can lead to the thrombus formation or occlusion there. And then when the stents are protruded more than 2 centimeter inside the aorta, so that is also a negative factor for the for the kissing stent, that lead to the higher restenosis or occlusion rate. And then the position of the stents. Normally the cross the stents in the aortic bifurcation, and but it is found that if the stents are parallelly placed, they have a better geometry than the crossing the stent, because they keep on pressing on each other. So leads to the higher restenosis or occlusion in case of stents who are crossed in the aorta. So to modify this geometry and hemodynamic significance of this, the Serap technique was introduced in 2013. That is the covered endovascular reconstruction of the aortic bifurcation. So in this technique, the access is same, and the lesions are crossed, and the stent, basically the stent graft, a balloon expandable stent graft, is placed infrarenally, approximately 1.5 to 2 centimeter above the bifurcation. And the proximal stent, it is the stent size is 12 mm, and the proximal segment is flared with the 16 mm balloon, and it is to make it funnel shape, so that it opposes to the aortic wall. And then from below, the two iliac stents of 8 mm diameter are inserted into the aortic stent. And according to basically the Serap technique, that leads to the better geometry and the hemodynamics, and lead to the less occlusion and the restenosis rate. So these are the basically the results published on the SERAP technique, and they have found it is a optimal endovascular option for the aortoalic occlusive disease, and found a secondary patency rate of 97% at 24 months. So it is equal to the kissing stent, but have a better geometry, and the long-term results are still required for this technique to find out whether it is better than the kissing stent technique. So what are the predictors of the failure? So any disease which is extending to the external iliac artery has a less patency rate, because external iliac artery is a tortuous artery, and it is that because of the heavy calcification also, any disease extension into the external iliac artery leads to the less patency. And any patient with the chronic limb threatening ischemia or patient having the common femoral artery disease have a less patency rate of the stents, and the patient with the female gender or the small vessel diameter. The CFA disease is depends on the burden of CFA disease, but if the CFA and arterectomy is done along with, then the patency rates are higher than the without endarterectomy. So long-term mortality rate are approximately 17% at 5 years and 36% at 10 years reported in the different studies. So what are the complications of the endovascular management? So it can be the contrast related, can lead to the contrast nephropathy. So all the preventive measures should be taken, and before pre-operatively and intraoperatively. Then complication can be sheath related, that is around 1 to 3%, and can be the hematoma, pseudoaneurysm formation. And to prevent these complications, we can use either the closure devices to close the to approximate the femoral artery, and in case the calcification is present on the posterior wall, then we can wait for the heparin effect or the activating basically ACT to come down to less than 200, and then we should remove the sheath to prevent the hematoma or the pseudoaneurysm. Then patient with the extensive calcification, they have a rate of less than 1% of the arterial rupture. So in this, if any case the arterial rupture happens, then first we have to basically we can balloon occlude the aorta from the contralateral side, and we can upgrade the ipsilateral sheath, and that rupture can be covered with the basically covered stent. So then the arterial dissection or the atheromatous embolization. So post-operative management is basically we have to optimize the risk factor that should be done pre-operatively and post-operatively both, and the patient should be followed up at 1 month, 6 months, and 1 year. And the criteria for the change in clinical status is the basically patient is called clinically improved when there is a upward shift by at least one category in claudicants and 2 categories in patients with tissue loss. And the ABPA should be monitored post-operatively. It should be increased more than 0.1 or 0.15. And for the patency, we have to check either with the ultrasound or repeat CT can be done after 6 months or 1 year. And if there is any diameter reduction with the stented diameter of more than 50%, that indicate significant restenosis. Or on ultrasound, if there is a doubling of peak systolic velocity, and there is non-invasive, there is a drop of ABPA of more than 0.1 or more than 0.15. So this is the algorithm for the management of aortoiliac occlusive disease. So any lesion which is not extending into aorta, so isolated treatment of iliac artery, that is PTA with the stenting can be done. But if the disease is extending into the aorta and the stent protrusion more than 2 centimeters is required, then we can treat them if it is less than 2 centimeters is required, then we should treat them with the kissing stent treatment or with the SERAP technique. But if more than 2 centimeters is required and there is a healthy zone below the renal artery, then if it is healthy zone below the renal artery is not present, the patient should go for because the risk of atheroembolization to the renal artery, if the patient is fit, we should opt for the open surgery. But if the patient is not fit, we can go ahead with the chimney SERAP technique. And if there is a necessity to prevent preserve the inferior mesenteric also, then also we prefer the chimney Serap technique. And if it is not necessary to preserve IMA, then can alone go for the Serap technique. So then in conclusion, basically in aortoiliac occlusive disease is that do not attempt to achieve the perfect image, because this can lead to the complication, either the arterial rupture, dissection, and we should basically the treatment should be effective rather than the cost factor. It should be effectiveness should be the decisive factor in the percutaneous treatment. And then that effectiveness is basically checked with the hemodynamic parameters. There's systolic gradient is less than 10 millimeter of mercury, and there is a less than 20% of the remaining stenosis. That is all about aortoiliac occlusion.